So
or YouTube.
I'm not just pleased, I feel a little excited to call this meeting of the Resiliency and Sustainability Advisory Committee because all the things we're talking about today are so positive for our city and moving along, and particularly when we get to the section about our proposed climate action plan. And I can't thank Katie McCain enough for just incredible efforts of marshaling hundreds of volunteers and thousands of comments and really moving this ball forward. Katie, you've done a remarkable job, and I'm going to say more about that later. So welcome everybody, and please join me just for a moment of silence as we pray for our efforts going forward. Amen. Thank you so much. So we're going to knock this off with an update from Mark Gilbert on our Peninsula Flood Risk Management study, along with the Corps of Engineers, fondly referred to as the 3x3 study, with the addition of an environmental impact statement. Maybe it's more like a 4x4 than a 3x3, but that's all good. And I don't steal your thunder, but City Council did approve all the membership of an advisory committee that we've formed to really focus, really drill down on this study from a citizens and public engagement point of view and recommendations to our council. So I'm excited about that as well. Mark?
Thank you, Mayor. And very quickly, I just want to pretty much reiterate what the Mayor just said. Everyone, if you're interested, I would encourage you to go on the Army Corps' website and take a look at those scoping documents. And if you're interested in submitting a comment, we want to encourage you to do that. They'll probably do another pretty heavy press release encouraging more comments. They've got quite a slew already, but we're going to do another press release with the Army Corps here in the next couple of days. So please pay attention for that if you're interested. Also, as the Mayor said, we're meeting with the chairperson for the committee tomorrow, Kalen, and I will be meeting with him tomorrow to kind of talk about looking forward to the committee. And the last thing I'll say on the 3x3 is a lot of good information. I just came off an hour-long phone call of some really intensive modeling work that they're finally starting to get back, all very positive for our city, or positive for the project, I should say. So anyway, I'll leave it at that, and just say stay tuned. And if you're interested in making comments, please go forward and do that.
Great. Any questions to Mark or anybody you want to make any other comments about the Corps 3x3 study?
This is Carol. I just wanted Mark to know that somebody just asked in the chat if you put the link to the Army Corps comment screen, please.
It's like my biggest fear in the world. I don't know how to do that, but I will spend the rest of the hour trying to do that. Okay, if we'll make sure we get it out.
And maybe it would be helpful to this group if we could publish the full list of the advisory committee panel, whatever you're calling the Mayor. Okay. I don't know. We appointed them officially at council the other night, but I think that would be great to have that list of people.
We'll get the ordinance, the list of people, all of that sent out to everybody after the meeting.
Great. And I'm just looking at the chat comments myself. So Kristen, is it Miguez? Welcome and thank you for being here for the Council of Governments.
Thank you.
Yeah, good to see you. I think everybody else has been on our commission for quite some time and knows each other. So thank you for being with us this morning. So next on the agenda already is to talk about Heatwatch, an urban heat island mapping, and Janice Barnes is going to welcome. Good to see you, Janice. Let me say before you start, Janice, that I give you our thanks for helping bring this to Charleston. You know, I don't know if most people think about this because we get infatuated and maybe rightfully so with hurricanes and hurricane seasons, but more people die from heat as a weather phenomena than any other weather phenomena in our country. And like so many things in our society, when you peel back the onion, this is yet another example where inequities exist in our society of who can deal with excess heat versus who can't. Now, I'm not going to begrudge anybody who's financially able to do this, but you know, it's always been hot in Charleston, right? And it's just getting hotter. And August is one of the worst months of the year historically. I mean, we've all, if you grew up here, you know that, right? And yes, there's some fortunate people who have the ability to have a house up in the mountains. And I mean, they would just go to the mountains for the month of August, literally. I mean, when I was a kid, Charleston was became a little bit like a ghost town in August because so many people left town because it's so hot. Well, you know, those conditions exist. Not everybody can afford a house in the mountains, you know, and so that little historical reference, I mean, really accentuates, I think, the need for us to have this mapping done to identify places in our city where it's appropriate to focus on to bring some relief and be aware, to build our resilience and bring some more equity even on a resilience level to our city. So maybe I said too much, but Janice, thank you again. It's always good to see you, and excited that you're helping us with this project.
Well, thank you, sir. Very much appreciated. And thanks to everyone for the opportunity to share this good news. Can you see the screen okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So in the maybe 8 or 10 minutes, hopefully we can go through this pretty quickly. You have a deck, and I will say the only updates here are the fact that we have collaborators who are joining, and the footer at the bottom is getting pretty small because we have additional people to recognize. But let's just talk through this briefly. The commendation to the city for undertaking the vulnerability assessment can't be overstated. Not every city's done what you've done, and to raise up your vulnerabilities and to be working on those actively beyond what code requires is admirable and something to certainly recognize. When we think about extreme heat as one of those, and we look at, see if I can get this thing to move, and we look at what the projections are. This is from the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit, which was co-authored with the same team that you hired to work with you, Fernleaf Interactive. We look at these projections. Kirsten Dowd did a great job of saying, so what, right? So looking back, how many days of extreme heat has Charleston seen? Looking forward, that looks like it's going to double, triple by the end of the century. And the one thing that we know is, and this is recent data from weather.gov and the National Weather Service, is that the number of fatalities on a 30-year average, as the mayor was saying, much higher for heat. It's one of those silent killers. We say don't wade through 3 feet of extreme heat, so sometimes you forget about it. And as a Southerner, I recognize it, kind of wear it as a badge of honor to say how much can you put up with. But the extreme heat issues that come from the climate are exacerbated by the urban heat island. This is an example from some work we did with other collaborators in Tel Aviv, where you can see the differences in neighborhoods. And while we know this data and understand that different parts of Charleston will experience extreme heat differently, what we realized in working with Christine and the team at the Charleston Medical District was we probably needed to raise this up in some way that makes it locally relevant. So last August, speaking of August, we took a typical day. Here's the weather on the left side. Here's what was actually experienced. And we did some surface temperature readings. Now that's not sufficient, but it is a necessary starting point when you need to create the conversation. These circles have to do with the intensity of temperature, and these are just sampling spots. It's not comprehensive, but sampling. And the kinds of things that we saw, like the back of the VA, some of the surface temperatures in the morning in the shade, 80 degrees surface temperature, and in the sun, and this is where the shuttle picks up on the backside, even in the sun in the morning, surface temperatures were pretty extreme. And we used a FLIR device, which is the same thing that the Heatwatch team, researcher Jeremy Hoffman had recommended. It's a little attachment that you can put on your phone that helps you visualize. So the brighter areas or the hotter areas, and this just gives you a sense of the range. I'm not sure you can see very well on your screen, but this is 117, it's 109 on the door of the shuttle, 111 or almost 112 at the wall. Why is this important? It's important because it gives us an indicator of what the situation is. It doesn't even address humidity. It doesn't address whether or not the wind is blowing, but it tells us that we have people who are exposed to quite warm temperatures in the mornings, gets worse over the course of the day, and it stays. B Street's an important example for you because of all the investments that are intended for B Street. So hopefully you can see some of these numbers. This slide is also in your packet if you'd like to look at it that way. But imagine walking down B Street and you have this unrelenting kind of exposure to the sun on top of the radiating heat from these surfaces. And that also took us to some questions about what happens with surfaces. So these are some samples of different types of materials within the medical district and how the range of material type actually impacts the surface temperature. So there are design decisions that can be made, is what this basically means, that can begin to cool things down. So what's actually happening? There are two programs happening, and we want to talk about the latter one for the most part today, but you should know about the former one. So the Carolinas Integrated Sciences Assessment Team is conducting a heat research program with the Citadel and with the medical district. It's primarily focused on outdoor workers, so MUSC groundskeepers, Citadel groundskeepers, and MUSC public safety. The Heatwatch research program is focused on the NOAA Heatwatch cohort. Hopefully you saw the announcement that went out across the country yesterday. So the heat research program and the Heatwatch program, CISA and Heatwatch may be the best way to remember it. There's a lot of detail that compares these, and I think Katie sent you a one-pager so you can look at those details and kind of get a better sense of it. What does it actually mean in terms of time? So the CISA team is developing their research protocols. These protocols will use eye buttons, Garmin watches to track movements. You're going to be collecting biometric data that goes through a human subjects review, the institutional review board. The Heatwatch program is going to be collecting temperature and humidity data, and that program is the one we're going to talk about next. But these are going to run in parallel. So while one is being developed, the details I'm going to share with you today about Heatwatch also being developed, you're going to be, the research is actually going to be conducted in Charleston at about the same time, but CISA is going to run for about 4 weeks. So working with those populations to better understand over a 4-week period what the experiences are. That 4-week period will overlap the Heatwatch research, which is a 1-day data collection, a sampling. And that data for both will be analyzed in the summer. So the NOAA program has a lot of details. The website's in the upper right corner here. The reason NOAA is focused on this is because of the very things the mayor just said. Heat research on health impacts is understood, and I'm trying to raise that up. So this program is the 3rd year of a cohort now, and it's really nice to see. This is the new map. So you can see that before this year, the Southeast was not well represented in the program. So we're really glad that NOAA selected Charleston, and many thanks to all the different people who helped put that application together. What is the program? So the program basically asks the city to consider sub-areas. This is Houston's example on the screen, to consider sub-areas around the city to sample that temperature and humidity data. The output is GIS data, which you could then think about in terms of your comprehensive plan or any of your other capital projects to say, these areas for Houston, these areas are super hot. If we're going to be doing a capital project there, or if we need to do a capital project there that hasn't been fully formed, how might we begin to integrate heat reduction as part of that? So it's an important layer to add to the city data that you already have. It's also a community science program. The community science side of this is the volunteers. So these are volunteers from the Houston program who use these car-mounted devices in order to go out on that day and collect data. In Houston, they had about 400 people. We're talking about maybe 30 people. So not quite as big of a footprint, but not quite as big of an ask of volunteers. The other important part of this is that in getting community members involved, you raise up awareness, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. So then the follow-up. So in Houston, I'm using this as an example because they went just before us and they were kind enough to share a lot of their lessons learned with us. So they just finished up last year. So now what they're doing this next year is running this in parallel with a tree planting campaign and some other heat health initiatives, different programs within the city. So that's an opportunity as well for you. So what are our next steps? Our next steps are to work through the routes in the sub areas. So we'll be meeting with Mark and Robert Houck and some of the other team members this Friday to start that conversation. The funding that NOAA has provided goes directly to CAPA strategies. The work that they will do will work within about 100 square miles around the city, which gives us about 11 sub areas. So we have to decide how those get chunked. And these points on the screen are the recommendations from NOAA and CAPA strategies about how to think about that. So there's work to do to sort it out. I think there's also, just in terms of awareness, the opportunity to raise up things that you're already doing. So the warning systems that you rely on, the coping strategies that are in place through other activities in the city, what you're doing with mitigation, which is the majority of your meeting today, right? What's happening in terms of events. There are some of these that happened last week, some that are happening next week, and big shout out to everyone who's trying to get the word out on Heatwatch as well. And then there are projects that are underway or that are under consideration. So just to summarize, there are 4 issues here. We want to increase awareness because that's the first way to reduce risk, right? Make better decisions. We want to increase coping capacity. So issues like energy poverty, weatherization, many things that would relate directly to the mitigation plan. The mitigation itself, so reduce the increases in urban heat island, reduces the losses in tree canopy, and then adaptation. Because of that tripling of extreme heat days in Charleston within the century, how do we begin to adapt our physical environment, our behavioral environment for that? There's work that's already happening with the Heatwatch program. You have a hashtag, and then NOAA has one just below. There's the city website. Shout out to Cameron for getting that set up with Mark's guidance. And then there are many collaborators. I put a star on this because the list continues to grow. Heat health crosses a lot of different barriers. And like the mayor said, those barriers relate to inequities, but also other health comorbidities like gestational birth issues. There are COPD related issues. There are issues related to cardiovascular and other respiratory concerns. So it just brings in a much wider audience. And I guess I'll just stop there and see if there are any questions. But again, just want to give a big shout out, 1, to the city for raising up vulnerabilities, and 2, for all the work that you're doing to draw down those risks. And then 3, to all the collaborators who have stepped forward to give time and to help get this program to run.
Well, thank you, Janice. That's quite a comprehensive study, much more so, and it's interesting to me, the intersections that exist between our health and wellness efforts on one hand and our climate change efforts that we're going to talk about in just a minute, because the biggest heat loss, energy loss, I should say, among all the different areas is from our buildings. So if you look at the weatherization and aspect of this program, we definitely can tie a number of helpful things together. Does anyone have any questions for Janice or comments that they'd like to make on this initiative? Carol.
Mr. Mayor, yeah, it's Carol Jackson again. I had the pleasure of listening to Janice at the Charleston Resilience Network coffee hour last week. So I'm proud of myself that I remembered a lot of the stuff, but it's really amazing, you know, the level and the breadth of detail and collaboration, as the mayor said. So I'm picking up on, you're talking about recruiting volunteers somewhere around the number of 30 for 100 square miles. And is that a manageable number? Is that why you're keeping a lot lower than, I don't know how many miles Houston covered, but would more volunteers be better, or are you happy with just that 3 dozen? Because I totally agree with what you said. The more people volunteer, the more ownership we have, the more invested, you know, the citizenry are. So just give us your opinion.
Yeah, it's a great question. So there are 3 ways short term that you could think about volunteers. For collecting the data, the folks who are going to drive the car, put the gear on the outside of the car, and then bring it back and turn it in. We need 11 sub areas to be covered, which means 22 people, a driver and a navigator for each, right? 11 times 2. Because the weather, doggone it, sometimes changes right up at the end. We may have to move it within a week of the assumed date. We may have a change in weather, which requires us to move. So the extra 11 could be an extra 22 are backup pairs in case the change in date means someone couldn't participate. So that's level 1. That's the people who have to go out and collect the data. Level 2 would be parallel activities. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could think about ways to highlight the tree planting programs or the other activities that you're already doing that draw down heat risk, and do, I don't know, pop-up tables at key places to let people understand. So that would be level 2, and you could get volunteers for that. The third level would be to say, given all the power of the networks that this group and the Charleston Resilience Network and all the collaborators represent, could you do more to get the word out just about heat health awareness and invite people in for subsequent activities beyond the day itself? So to your point, yes, it would be great to have more, and it would be great to think about this as a program and complement to all the other good work you're doing.
Thank you very much.
Good point. Anyone else? Comments or questions? All right.
If I may.
Yeah.
Janice, Mark Messersmith with the Ports Authority. To me, it seems it'd be really interesting to know not just what the temperature radiating from that structure or surface is, but the net change or the net difference from what the ambient air temperature is. So that seems like more of the issue. There's the ambient air temperature may be 100 degrees, and so we want to know, is it 10 degrees more hotter off of that surface versus another one, and then how far does that surface influence the surrounding air temperature?
You're absolutely right. Great question. So the CISA work that we were describing, you're going to be doing 2 things. One, the behavioral things that I just described, the watches, the eye buttons. The other is wet bulb globe temperature monitoring at sample sites around the city. So the wet bulb globe temperature will pick up the temperature, humidity, as well as the wind speeds, and be able to give us a better sense of what that context, that microclimate actually tells us. For the surface temperature readings and the comparison of that, if we're really smart researchers, we'll layer all of these pieces together and get a much stronger sense of some sample sites around the city. So if you have a situation, urban park, mostly grass, little shade, by comparison to a heavily forested park, versus impervious surface, no shade, or the things like up by the complex on the north side where you have some interesting bioswales drawing down heat in the parking lot. It would be really smart from a comprehensive planning perspective, and given all the work you're doing on water, to think about how these typologies of situations become levers where you can do kind of more water and heat as opposed to water only or heat only. And if you understand those typologies, then it gives you some tools to work with as you're making those capital or programmatic investments.
Absolutely. So it seemed, Janice, pretty apparent, and this is just common sense, that the, paved, impervious areas, held the most heat and showed the highest temperatures. And it just, again, intersects so nicely with our resilience efforts on flooding to plant more trees and try to provide a little more green space. I was over at Daniel Island. I'll give you an example, and I didn't come up with this, but I was very pleased. We had the groundbreaking for the renovation, almost reconstruction of the Volvo Tennis Center over there. And they had planned a plaza out in front of the entryway to the stadium. And the original proposal was that basically, even though I think it would be a pervious material, but it was basically a big open hardscaped area. And they, Ben Navarro told me the other day, well, Mayor, we've kind of changed our thinking. We'd like to do this, in essence, a grove of oak trees out there. And I was like, well, great. I mean, that's just what we need to be thinking about in every space that we plan to try to maximize that. But this ties in beautifully with it. And so thank you again for helping charge this up for us. And I think it just folds in so nicely with all our other efforts. I think the timing couldn't be better. I'm glad that NOAA chose Charleston, South Carolina. And in fact, Admiral Hahn was in my office the other day, and all the partnerships we have with NOAA are really terrific here in Charleston. For those listening, if you didn't know, they have 2 of their research vessels home ported here in Charleston, and Charleston is a real central place for NOAA's operations, and we're so supportive of them and all the work they do and the partnerships we have with them.
Mr. Mayor, this is Rick DeVoe. If I may just jump in real quick and just say that as a Sea Grant program, Sea Grant has sort of manifested itself in NOAA.
That's
and
right.
We always teased about Charleston being NOAA South. So I just wanted to share that with you.
I like that. NOAA South, it's Charleston. Great. Thank you, Rick. Okay, so next is the presentation by Katie of our climate action plan. It's the culmination of not just months, but years of effort by the city, and has been so ably led by Katie, as I mentioned when we began the meeting. Even in the last year of COVID, the amount of public engagement and participation has been remarkable. I think more than any other public engagement that we've been involved with as a city, and it shows you the level of interest by our citizens and the realization that of the importance of this issue of making the changes that we need to make locally to impact the climate on for our planet. And we in Charleston, being in the low country and so close to sea level, as you all know, we're on the front line. We see the impacts of sea level rise and extreme weather as much as any place, I think, in the world. And that's why it's hit close to home for us. And it's time for us to move on to this next step. So with that little intro, Katie, take us away, tell us where we are now, and let's have some discussion about it.
Great, thank you so much, Mayor. I'm really excited to present this plan to you today. There's been a lot of work happening all winter. And we wouldn't be where we are without the countless volunteers who help participate. So thank you, everyone. I know a few of them are on the call with us here today. So just as the mayor mentioned, we're seeing these localized impacts from, flooding, sea level rise, these impacts from climate change, but we haven't had a plan that actually addresses the root cause of climate change, which is reducing emissions. I love this quote: "We are the first generation to feel the sting of climate change, and we are the last generation that can do something about it." Here's a graph from our local tide trends dashboard. And you can see in 2019, we had 86 high tide events that were at or greater than 7 feet. So this was a call to action for us, really. We started with the greenhouse gas inventory, which formed the basis for the data for the climate action plan. And we did that last summer. And then we kicked off the community engagement process in the fall with a survey and public meetings. And then we formed 6 different volunteer groups that met all winter. And we've had a lot of people engaged in this process. As you can see from the numbers on the right, there's been over 30 meetings that happened all winter. And then in March, we did a second community survey and public meeting, and that's posted on YouTube if anyone wasn't able to make it. We engaged almost 500 people in that process, and we got some really great input from residents who really felt like we were on target with the climate action plan. So it was really good feedback to hear. And here we are today presenting it. So a special thanks to everyone who's participated. As you all know, there's been 8 different committees that are part of this. So after this committee, it will then go to City Council. We've talked about this a lot, but I think it's worth repeating because we want to make sure we're checking all these boxes, and I think we are. So a successful climate action plan in Charleston includes ideas and support from the whole community. We're talking about stakeholders, residents, business owners, staff, and of course our elected officials too. And these folks were all involved in the working groups, which was really helpful. A successful plan will be focused on climate mitigation because we already have an adaptation plan. I'll talk about that more in a moment. Successful plan is focused on actions we have control over or can heavily influence. So for example, Charleston County manages the recycling program, not the city. We also want to make sure we're prioritizing this plan on our local goals and needs. And last but not least, we want to make sure we're centering this plan on equity and ensure that the benefits and the challenges of climate action are shared amongst all community members. So I think we've all seen this graphic before, the difference between climate mitigation and climate adaptation. Both are really important to achieve climate resilience. Mitigation, we're actually talking about the cause of climate change and addressing that root cause by reducing emissions, whereas adaptation, we're talking about the impacts of climate change and addressing the risks of climate change, such as how to prevent flooding. Now, there are some items that cover both mitigation and adaptation. We call these the power tools, really. Think of a tree helps absorb floodwater and absorbs, solar radiation from the sun that helps with the urban tree canopy, as Janice talked about. And then a tree also has a process of sequestering carbon dioxide during photosynthesis. So that helps with mitigation too. So generally, we have our flooding and sea level rise strategy, which I believe we will be updating later this year. That's really focused on adaptation. This climate action plan is focused on mitigation, and together these will make up our resilience plan. You may have noticed they're formatted the same. That was purposeful, so we can eventually put them together if we choose. So as I mentioned, there were 6 different working groups that developed this plan, and they really created the content for it. So I'm going to stop there before I jump into some specific details. And I just wanted to share the actual plan with you and just go over how it's laid out. Okay, so here's our cover. We have a lovely picture from Liz. Thank you very much. And the Nature Conservancy. Table of contents, we can fly through this. So our vision is to substantially reduce carbon pollution in an equitable way and improve the health and quality of life of Charlestonians now and in the future. Then we have an introduction that introduces our climate challenges and what the purpose is. We talk about our community engagement process and identify all the folks who were part of it. And I apologize for not including it sooner, but I have added this committee up here. You have definitely been part of this process. Then we have a section that just highlights our greenhouse gas emissions from 2018 and talks about life cycle emissions and how important it is that we think about how goods are actually produced and transported to get to us, which are not included in the inventory. Then the fun part, right? Then we talk about our emissions reduction goals. They're highlighted right here, which we'll talk about in more detail soon. And then we have a page here on how we reach the goals and a chart showing us our forecast. So we'll go into this soon. We have a page here on all the benefits of climate measures. So yes, this report is about reducing emissions, but there are so many other additional benefits for the people and the economy of Charleston that we'll see from this. So for example, when we talk about protecting our wetlands and our carbon sinks, our powerful carbon sinks, those are also are powerful flood mitigation measures. They absorb lots of stormwater and sea level rise. They're also pretty beautiful. Lots of co-benefits. We have a whole section here on social equity and how it was integrated into the plan. And then we have a section on how we assessed all these action items that were proposed. And here's some icons that are used in the action plan. And then we jump into each chapter. So each chapter is 4 pages, and it really starts with the primary targets. And we have added a emission reduction piece for each sector at the top here. And then we talk about equity considerations. You know, what are all those co-benefits we'll see from these actions? What are some of the education opportunities? What are some partners that are interested or could be helpful to achieve these goals? And some external funding opportunities, particularly grants. So then you can see there's a table here that outlines the strategies and the action items. And you can see their emission reduction potential, their cost, and their priority. So I won't run through all the specific actions just because y'all have seen a list of those for the last 2 months, but we can certainly talk about any that you're interested in. And then there's a progress spotlight at the end of each section. So this one for buildings is about our energy performance contract and how we've improved energy efficiency in our city facilities. Transportation, same thing, action plan. And then here's a spotlight on our new bicycle and pedestrian options that are really exciting. Our new protected bike lane on Brigade Street, I'm very excited about. Waste, same thing here. And in the waste section, we do a spotlight on reducing our single-use plastics, which you all have heard lots about last year, the year before. And then finally, we have our carbon sinks chapter, and we spotlight our Charleston Rainproof program. And then we end with really a call to action, helping folks understand that we really need everyone to be part of the solution. You know, government can't solve this problem alone. This action plan puts forward some policies and programs that will help catalyze action from the community, but it's really up to the community to take action. This last page you can actually print out, so you could put it on your refrigerator if you wanted to, or keep it close. And it's a checklist for climate action around your home. So that is the plan in a nutshell. And now I would like to dive into a couple details, specifically some of the graphs that we were looking at. So our emission reduction goals. So these were based on science. They were calculated, and you can see we started with a goal around 50%, and then when we calculated this for the science-based, it turned out to be 56%, which was great, meant we were on the right track. So our short-term goal puts us on track to meet the net zero goal. That's the idea. And it helps us measure progress sooner than 2050, since that is so far away. So our goal is to reduce emissions 56% below our 2018 inventory levels by the year 2030. And then, of course, a net zero goal by 2050. So these are based on science. And if you're not familiar, net zero means we're going to add no more carbon dioxide equivalent to the atmosphere than we take away with things such as trees or carbon capture. So it's important to note that this plan is a 5-year plan. So this strategy is meant to be designed for 5 years. You'll see this goal is 10 years away. It's 2030. So when we look at this next slide, I'll explain to you why that's so important. So to achieve these goals, you know, they seem complex, but they're very doable, especially because the science to do this already exists. We know what we're doing, we just need to take action. So two real main things need to happen for us to get on track to meet that 2030 goal. So of course we need to implement this climate action plan, and we need to inspire community action. This can't just be government. This has to be the whole Charleston community on board and being part of the solution. And also, we are very dependent on our utilities transitioning away from fossil fuels to renewable energy. So that is also an important part of achieving that goal. So here's a graph that illustrates that the actions in this 5-year strategy are putting us on a path to achieve the 2030 goals. So you'll see this blue line on the top. We call this the business as usual line. This includes the grid improvements that the utilities plan to make in the next through 2050 right now. That's the plan right now. So basically it's using our state electricity mix that's saying 44% of the electricity right now is produced from fossil fuels. And by 2050, that will be down to 22%. So this line is based on the population increasing and the utility reducing fossil fuel use. Now you'll notice it's down to 22% and not 0 because there is a plan to be an increase in natural gas, which is also a fossil fuel. So even though coal is being phased out or has plans to be phased out, hopefully the natural gas may be increased, and that natural gas still produces emissions and is still a fossil fuel, even though it is much cleaner than coal. So if we did nothing, that business as usual line, that's where our emissions would be by 2050. So you can see we don't want to be following that line. So when we look down to this red dotted line here, this shows our short-term goal. So here's 2030 right here. You can see that 2025 is right in here, and we are on a path to meet the 2030 goal, but we're not there. So there's still a lot that we will need to consider. And in 5 years, technology is going to change a lot. You know, look at how the solar industry has changed in the last 5 years. Policy is going to change a lot. There's going to be a lot of big policy decisions coming out for Earth Day next week that really could influence this. So that's why we say this is a 5-year strategy that puts us on the path to achieve the 2030 goal, but there is still much more work to do. So within the action plan, there are 12 different strategies and there are 51 different action items, and the majority of them are in the transportation section. And I'll just run through the strategies with you all. So for the building section, we have 2 strategies: increasing energy efficiency and conservation, where we have the most control over, and promoting and planning for renewable energy, where we depend on our utility a little bit there too. In the transportation sector, increasing the use of public transit. So recognizing the city does not manage public transit, but that we do have a say and we can format what we do to help increase transit. Embracing electric and other low or no emission motors. Increasing bicycle and pedestrian activity. Improving land use policy to reduce vehicle miles traveled. Increasing employee commuter options, and reducing idling. For the waste sector, and you'll see that is Tammy in the picture. She unfortunately couldn't be with us today at the farmers market, but there's 2 strategies for waste: reduce consumption and waste from the start. That's the most powerful strategy, and where you can't, increase recycling and composting especially. And then for carbon sinks, there's 2 strategies: expanding and protecting our tree canopy, and protecting and promoting our natural ecosystems like our marshes and our wetlands. So as I mentioned, every single action in this plan has 2 or more additional benefits for the entire community. Some of these actions have up to 7 benefits. So we looked at, cost savings. Improving mobility, improving public health and air quality is a really big one. Protecting our ecosystems and water quality. Safety, of course, is a great benefit. Improving the economy, enhancing climate adaptation, historic and cultural preservation, and being a role model and helping to raise awareness in the community is also a great co-benefit. And of course, beautification. So I'll end with the you can help section. You know, this is really, as I mentioned, government can't do this alone. We need everyone to be part of it, and we can all take small steps, and all those small steps add up. You can use that checklist at the end of the action plan. There's also some great content on our website for how folks can get involved and help. But that is sort of the wrap up to the plan, is a take home message for our community. And that's why the community has been so involved in creating this plan, because ultimately it's the community that's really implementing it. So, and then to finish, I wanted to share that there will be 3 ways that we'll report on implementation progress. So the first way is to continue updating our FloodStat dashboard. And I want to just switch tabs here for a moment and take you to our FloodStat dashboard. So if you haven't been here, the Mayor's Office of Innovation has created this new priority stat program that helps us stay accountable to the mayor's top priorities. And there are 5 different top priorities and 4 different stat programs, we call them, that track them. The first stat program is this FloodStat program. And this one is based around helping to reduce the city's, let me click on it and I'll show you. Increase the city's resilience to flooding, sea level rise, and storm surge. So then in this FloodStat program, there are a whole bunch of measures. We call them key performance indicators, or KPIs, and then metrics associated with the measures. And you can see there's a status indicator and what the lead department is for each of these. So I'd encourage you to check this out if you haven't. I'll put the link in the chat. But if you go down here to KPI number 5, reduce the flood risk to the city through community activism, you can see there's 5 here that relate to the sustainability division. And there's 2 related to carbon emissions. So if I click on this, reduce the city's carbon emissions 80% by 2050, which, as you all know, was our old emissions goal. You can see the significance of what we're doing comes up, our goals. And then when I scroll down, this platform called Microsoft Power BI will show us how to track our emissions. And you can actually see this is our 2018 greenhouse gas inventory split up into a format that's easily digestible. And you can see on the right here, this is where we can track progress on achieving our emissions goals. So this is one way to track our progress. Tracy, did you have anything you wanted to add about FloodStat or priority stat?
Whoops. No, Katie, I think you did a really great job. And I think just knowing that it is around all of the mayor's priorities, and that we're all working, it brings the whole city together as a team to make sure we are moving the needle together on the mayor's highest priorities and the city's highest priorities. So, you know, very proud of all the work that all the departments have put into it and defining their measures and their goals. So thank you, Katie, for bringing a little sunshine to this. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, Tracy. So then the second way that we'll report on implementation progress is actually progress on our plan. So the first one is progress on emissions, specifically progress on our plan. So if you go to this website, which is listed at the bottom of every page in the climate action plan, it will take you here. And this is a way you can track the progress on our initiatives. So you can see there's a key at the top here that shows the status of each initiative. So green means it's completed or it's an ongoing initiative. Yellow means it's been started but not complete yet. And red means it's not started yet. So you can go down this list and see that the majority of the items in this plan have have not been started yet or have just been started. So, and this updates automatically. And you can see the lead department names are on here. So yeah, you can see 20, 29, 57% have not been started yet, of course, because we have not adopted the plan yet. So there's the department lead right there. So we'll keep this updated so you can tell progress on our plan. Then finally, this is going to be a new item. Number 3 here is to produce an annual progress report for City Council and the public at the end of each year. And this will be a report that really tries to report on, all the activities that have been done throughout the year that help us meet our goals and tracking progress on those targets. So when you looked at each section, there were those 3 targets in the top left corner of the Climate Action Plan. Those are going to be our main targets that we're going to try to report on. There may be some others that we end up adding, but those are the ones we're going to try to show progress on at the end of each year. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and ask if there are any questions or comments or suggestions for improvement from the panel.
Any questions, comments, accolades, complaints?
I don't really need to go first every time, Mayor, but I just can't be happier or more proud to be here right now. It's making me cry. When I think about the work that's been poured into this by people like Stuart and obviously Katie and Christine and everyone that I can see on my screen and everyone that I can't see. I don't want to embarrass you, Mayor, but I don't know how many years ago, it was pretty early in your term, and you were giving an interview to somebody at the Post and Courier, and they were asking you about, all of our priorities for protecting the city from flooding and everything we were learning like that. And one of the questions that was asked that you had no answer for was, well, what are we doing to stop the cause of flooding? And you really had no answer. And I mean, maybe you did, and they just didn't want to talk about it. But at that point in time, I think we made a pivot. It was like, we can't not have an answer for why we have to worry about the biggest impacts of climate change on our city. And to think that this kind of progress has happened in that short a time, I mean, it's just remarkable. And I can't wait until we can put this in front of council and we can adopt this, and we're not putting it in the file cabinet. And I love that Katie has given us all the reasons that we'll continue to track and keep track. So we have to hold ourselves accountable, and I'm looking forward to that.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Christine?
I agree with everything Councilwoman Jackson just said, and the level of professionalism that was brought to this effort by Katie has just been phenomenal. And thank you so much for everything you've done. And I really like that in the presentation, Katie did keep coming back to, this is a community effort. This is going to take more than government. And one of the things I say as a sustainability manager is, just because I'm the sustainability manager doesn't mean that I'm going to make MUSC sustainable. We are going to make MUSC sustainable. So we as a community need to make the city of Charleston sustainable. And we all need to now, roll up our sleeves and get in there and help Katie do it.
Stuart?
Would it be in order now to entertain a motion for this committee to approve this and to move it on to the city council for approval?
I would consider that to be in order.
So moved.
DeVoe seconds.
DeVoe second. Any discussion? Well, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Let it be shown it was unanimous. Thank you all. Any other comments or questions before we open up for comments from the public?
Mr. Mayor, this is Rick DeVoe. I just want to say that I'm not in a official capacity anymore. I don't have the sort of the resources that I benefited from as a member of the public sector. But I do want to say that this project is unbelievable in terms of what it looks like, how it is presented. It's really user friendly. It's accessible by people who are not us. And it is so important when you're trying to engage a broader community and getting things done. There's something for everybody in it. And I would encourage us or others to really take this project and effort and get it out there, let folks know around the coast, around the state and the region, and even nationally what the city is doing with this report. This shows that it's a doable effort. It's not beyond the scope of anyone. The arguments against doing anything about it is that a little bit here, a little bit here is not going to make a difference. It's sort of like the forest fire thing, the old saying is we all have to be part of this. And if we can promote this as an example of what can indeed be done and is being done, I think it's going to be good for not only the city, but also for all of our colleagues and communities around the region.
Great. I agree. Thank you, Rick. So Katie, can I ask you to go back to that slide you had up of the two ladders? I've never seen that image before, and I found that to be what a picture says 1,000 words. And I must admit, in life and particularly in my time service as mayor, that we often encounter these challenges that we think are insurmountable. How are we going to change the climate and the planet? How are we going to get the affordable housing that we need? How are we going to protect Charleston against the flooding? And I think this picture is terrific, and I want to also give a shout out, y'all, to our priority stat system and program. It's kind of been germinating under the radar. Tracy McKee has led this thing through our innovation department, but it's been a real team effort. And what it does is it takes a large problem, it takes the elephant and brings it down to bite-sized efforts that different departments in collaboration and community partners can take to long-term make a difference and climb the ladder. And if you don't have a system like that in place, you'll be like that guy or lady over on the right-hand side. They can't even get to the first rung because they just view the problem as being insurmountable and not being able to take the actionable steps to get there, as Rick mentioned. And if you look at the last part of this climate action plan and think about your everyday life, and I did that the other night, and I'd like to think I'm pretty conscious about all these things, but I mean, we all have ways we can take additional steps to do a better job and climb that ladder over on the left. And I think it's just an amazing tool, this plan. And if we make it accountable through our stat system, our priority stat system, and our community accountability, we can make a difference. We can think globally and act locally and make a difference here in Charleston on a worldwide challenge of climate change. So I'm also very proud, like you, Councilmember Jackson, and particularly proud of Katie and our team and all of you to get us to this point, and also excited to bring this to council. So with all that being said, I know we're already approached an hour. I thought with today's agenda, we might run a few minutes over, but let's open up to any public comments or discussion from anybody else who is on the line with us today. Katie, are we doing that through the chat box, or you have another way of bringing people on?
Yes, so if you would like to speak, you can raise your hand. I do have one person signed up, so I'll let that person go first. I wanted to just share really quickly that Earth Day is April 22nd, so next Thursday. And the Keep Charleston Beautiful has an Earth Day litter cleanup if you're interested in joining that. And that we have added a new email list to our webpage. So if you're interested in signing up for that, you can go to the homepage to the Notify Me section. So first up, we have Steve Gilbert. So Steve, I'm going to unmute you and you have the floor. Mayor, do we have a time limit? It looks like we have about six people willing to speak.
Yeah, let's ask them to keep it to 90 seconds, maybe.
Okay.
Minute and a half, because I bet some others will sign on too.
Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Okay, first of all, let me congratulate you on the great work in this climate action plan. Wonderful document. In the short time I have to address you today, I just want to introduce the term and concept of preemptive resiliency. It goes along with the Dutch dialogue concept that the best solution to a problem is not to create it in the first place. It also can be a valuable element of the climate adaptation plan. A number of developments, particularly on Johns Island and West Ashley, in vulnerable receiving streams have been built or are planned to be built, are creating lots in wetlands, floodplains, and low areas, converting natural effective stormwater runoff detention, retention, and filtering systems to impervious surfaces, almost guaranteeing additional flooding problems. After reviewing the January 2020 draft city's stormwater design standards manual, the good news is that most of the fixes for this problem can be in place through implementation and enforcement of these design standards for new construction. I encourage you to advise the city to quickly finalize and implement the manual and its preemptive resiliency measures as soon as possible to avoid future disastrous and costly flooding problems. You should have received slightly longer set of comments, thanks to Katie, on this issue. And I encourage you to read these as well. And thank you for your time and consideration on this important issue.
Great. Thank you, Steve.
You're welcome.
Okay, next up is Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes. Hey, Chris.
Hi. This is Chris Carneville. I am resident of West Ashley, and I was I served on 2 subcommittees of the Climate Action Plan. So I just want to say thank you, Mayor and council members and committee members, for adopting the plan. I think first I just want to say, and I should also say thank you to Katie. As you know, as I served on those 2 subcommittees, I was very impressed by how much community input was gathered over the course of just a few months. I thought it looked like a very large task to assemble a plan like this in the course of half a year or so. And Katie and, with others like Stuart behind her, did an excellent job of diligently assembling the team. It was a very large team, as was indicated on that slide showing all of the volunteers. I think that there was an excellent job done of listening to everybody's ideas, cataloging everybody's ideas, and actually going through every single suggested element for action item, one by one with everybody, so we could discuss each item. So I think it was a very well done process. And so thank you, Katie and Stuart and everyone else who was involved there. Just speaking at a broader level, I think it's clear carbon dioxide in the atmosphere is at an unprecedented level in the history of human civilization. It's hot and getting hotter, as Dr. Barnes showed. We're looking at a future of more than 3 months every year of temperatures above 90 degrees. And that's just depressing to think about from a quality of life standard. But then when you think about the health impacts, heat is lethal. So you look at the other impacts of global warming, like sea level rise and heavy precipitation and flooding, stronger hurricanes, And it's clear that taking action on climate change isn't just about ecosystems. It's not just about saving the polar bears, but it's about improving the quality of life and protecting the public health and protecting the livelihoods of people who live here in Charleston. So, Katie shared that in the report, scientists have demonstrated that to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, we need to get to net zero carbon by middle of the century and about halfway to zero by 2030. And so this plan, it helps us get on the path. And I think that's incredibly important. And, by doing that, we can help, like I said, help protect quality of life, health, livelihoods, and make Charleston a better place for the residents and businesses. So thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks, Chris. Next up is Libby.
Libby, you're on mute.
Sorry, I would have said a lot of what he said, so I'll be really quick. One of the things I wanted to emphasize was how amazingly constructive this whole process was. Problems would be brought up, well, I don't think it should be that. And then the group would work together to figure out how do we keep that issue, but present it in a way that people are going to understand and accept. And you have a huge team of environmental activists that are going to be with you going forward, because I think everybody's really committed. And Katie's leadership in getting us to be constructive. One of my favorite parts were these assessment criteria. She would say, well, does it provide benefits? What's the equitability issue? What are the benefits financially? That brought lots of constructive things out, and we were able to document, again, what is really worth knowing about each of these things. And so it was both a pleasure, and I think we're going to have a very strong platform to go forward with. And thank you.
Thank you, Libby.
Great. Next up is Charleston Climate Coalition. I think that might be Belvin.
Yeah, I guess I'm still, this is Belvin. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Welcome.
Hey, everyone. Well, first off, I just want to say I'm also extremely proud of my city today. I'm actually feeling unexpectedly emotional because this is a great step, not just for our action, but when a southeastern city takes strong climate action, it has strong ripple effects. There's sort of a leadership effect that we can't discount. So I'm just extremely proud. I was honored to serve on some of these subcommittees with just a murderer's row of talent and expertise and intelligence, which we will have available to us as we continue to work on this. So I'm optimistic about the future of this plan. Real quick, I just want to say that I believe that it would be a wise investment to expand the staff of the Office of Sustainability. We've seen how effective Katie can be working solo, but I don't think we can expect her to be working solo that much longer and really put in the work we need to on this climate action plan. The city of Orlando has, I think, 11 or 12 people in their Office of Sustainability, and they got that by grants. So perhaps one way we could go forward is have a new staffer who focuses on finding grants, which could then snowball. And planting that seed, I think, would be a really wise thing at this juncture. And the other thing I'd like to say real quick is that you have a bully pulpit on the South Carolina energy system issue. And I would just encourage everyone on council, Mr. Mayor, to use that bully pulpit and to call for the state's utilities to transition as soon as possible and as equitably as possible to off of fossil fuels to renewable energy like solar and wind. There's something going around the People's Energy Plan, which is a racial equity focused transition plan. And I'd be happy to forward that information to y'all. And I would recommend y'all champion that because it's a great plan and we can make a difference by speaking out, and that's not so hard. Well, thanks y'all. I'm very proud of y'all. Proud of us. Looking forward to working on this with y'all.
Thank you. Thank you for your work on this as well.
Great. And next up is Renee.
Good morning. I want to begin by applauding Katie and Stuart for their hard efforts on this initiative and their willingness to take the time to speak with me one-on-one about my concerns, which I also want to echo to the panel, which is that our consumption-based emissions actually could be potentially 80% bigger than our sector-based emissions, which is what our plan is based on. And so understanding that, if we hit all the targets based on what we're measuring right now, we will still fall short. And so this plan is an absolutely necessary first step. It's necessary, but it's not sufficient. And so I would just encourage us to continue on that this is the beginning rather than the end, and that we need to, as a community, as Katie said many times, it'll take us as a community shifting our ideas about consumption, about the way we eat, particularly eating beef, and that the things that we chose to measure can have ripple effects into what we perceive we can do something about and how we set our priorities. And I just want to reiterate that it's really important for us as a city to basically keep a wider lens on how we're impacting climate and not just focus on the emissions that we're creating within our geography, because we are a net importer of goods. And so I just wanted to reiterate that. I know it's in the plan under the life cycle emissions, but I think it deserves reiterating. So thank you so much. And I agree with Belvin. More people in the Office of Sustainability. Katie is doing a great job, but I know she's overworked. And also the biggest leverage point we have is lobbying our utilities, that can make the biggest difference of everything is getting our utilities to shift away from fossil fuels, including natural gas. So thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Renee. We are on a journey.
Okay. Danielle, you are up next.
Who's up next?
Danielle, can you? There you go.
Hello, everyone. I would like to say, I think the Climate Action Plan is a great plan. It was done with a lot of super wonderful people, and I was glad to sit on the task force and the educational committee. Katie, you did a very excellent job, and I really think that it will pass through the city board. Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle.
You're welcome.
I don't see any others.
Anybody else? Back to the committee members. Anybody have any final comments or remarks they'd like to make? Councilmember Jackson. You're on mute.
Sorry, while Mr. Gilbert is on the line, I wanted to set the record straight. The city has enacted its Stormwater Manual 2020 as of July 1st of last year. So it is currently in operation whenever we look at a site permit for an eligible site, and we're about to make it required for even single sites in special protected hazard areas. So I wanted to make sure that everybody knows that.
Great, thank you. Anybody else? Well, committee members, thank you again for your time and energy. It is kind of a milestone today with this recommendation to council. I welcome you all to come to our next council meeting and be recognized for our committee's work on this. And again, I'm very proud of the community's engagement, but mostly proud of Katie's work on all this. But everybody, it was a real team effort. So thanks to everyone that played a part. And if there's no further business, we stand adjourned until next time. God bless y'all. Have a great day.
That's good. Thank you, everyone. And thank you, Stuart, for all your help.
Great job, everybody.